Welcome to the Siddha Podcast. I'm the host, Dr. Stella Watke, and today's guest is my husband, Marty Watke. Marty has worked with clients over 40 years, supporting them with neurofeedback and other forms of neurotherapies, or simply teaching them meditation. And one big issue many of his clients had and still have is simply sleep. Getting a restful sleep and a sleep where they get up, awake and refreshed. So thank you, Marty, for being here again.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Why do we sleep? And why is sleep important?
Okay, well, it's inherent on this whole planet. Everything sleeps. It's part of our biology's way of regenerating and rejuvenating itself. So it's an absolute important part of the process of life. And again, we see everything, the planet, the animals. Don't know so much about the insects, but certainly all animals have to sleep too.
So does that mean that certain things in our body, in our brain, certain processes, they kind of need us to be more quiet, more still, so that they can happen fluently or at all?
Yeah, I mean the stages of sleep uh, pretty much explain it all. As we go through the night, we go through these stages, and probably one of the most important stages is called slow wave sleep or deep sleep, and that's when the brain and cognitive functions, for all intents and purposes, goes offline. And it's during that deep sleep, slow wave sleep, roughly an hour and a half for the average person. That's when the body regenerates itself. Certain hormones are released, like melatonin, growth hormone. So in that stage, the body can uh, rebuild, I think, and repair. Extremely important when that stage is interrupted or blocked for various reasons. Uh, you see the aging process accelerate, and you see that with people who may use certain kinds of drugs and alcohol and so on. It blocks the sleep cycles.
Mm. You mentioned deep sleep. What other sleep stages are there?
Well, we cycle through these stages. Roughly a cycle lasts 90 minutes for most people, but there's REM sleep too. And REM is extremely important for cognitive function, for memory, and it is also sort of a therapeutic process where the subconscious mind is working out patterns and things that we've experienced during the day. So, again, it varies with the average person. REM may take up 90% of or I'm sorry, 20% of the total sleep cycle. Uh, and it's the same thing with slow wave sleep, the sleep cycle we mentioned earlier. Um, and, you know, now a real advantage that we tell our clients is there's many devices, wearable devices that basically use different algorithms to give you a breakdown of what your sleep was like. Everything from the Apple Watch, there's something called the Oura Ring, something called Whoop. Quite a few devices on the market now that I recommend. Now they're not 100% accurate because they use algorithms, the measuring sleep and, body temperature, breath rate, heart rate variability, and then it makes a guess. And most of the time it's fairly accurate. But the only way you can actually um, measure the sleep cycle is by using an EEG or electroencephalography. So actually measuring the brain activity, and then I mean that's the only proven real accurate. And
Right.
there's even a new device on the market now that does that. It's just a headband, and it comes with an app. And in the morning, you immediately get a graphs and a chart of how much time you spent in these stages. I've sort of researched this some and compared different devices, and the Elemind is really ELEMIND is comparable to some of the other devices out there. So it's nice to see that these devices are available, and we recommend them to people because number one, sometimes you may not think you slept so well, but then you look at one of these algorithms and if it's accurate, you see that you actually did sleep well. The other real benefit of using some kind of a device is you can see how the day before, if there were things affecting your sleep cycle. There's a rule called the 10-3-2-1-0 rule, and it stands for hours. So 10 hours, you shouldn't have any caffeine 10 hours prior to when you go to sleep. So that means tea, coffee, soft drinks, anything that contains caffeine should be avoided for a minimum of 10 hours before we go to sleep. Uh, then the next number is the three. So 10-3-2-1. Three, you shouldn't eat anything 3 hours before you go to bed. And there's many reasons for that because the body has to use a lot of energy, for digestion, of course, depends on what you eat, but there are certain foods that can uh, interrupt and throw off the sleep cycle. Even amino acids can create an overstimulation in the brain and sort of throw off the sleep cycle. Um, Two is don't work 2 hours before sleep. You know, turn your phone off, turn your iPad off, or your computer, whatever it is, and don't. Why? Because that stimulates pathways in the brain that you need to quiet down. Finally, the one is any kind of screen time. So you want to avoid screen time for at least minimum of 1 hour before you go to bed. So again, it's 10-3-2-1-0. The zero is for if you have to use an alarm and it has a snooze function, don't hit snooze, because that interrupting the sleep cycle early in the morning and then going back into it is not good. It throws off the um, the natural rhythms that are the brain and the physiology is going through in order to wake up and have a good day. So those are the basic rules that we try to explain to people. And if you adhere to those rules, it's not going to necessarily correct an insomnia. There may be other things that we need.
Mm.
Excuse me.
Um, when in your experience with clients, and when they come and they say, they don't sleep well, what are the major issues you have experienced with clients, why they don't sleep well, or what keeps them from sleeping?
Yeah, oftentimes it's what we call sleep hygiene, the list I just went through. I turn the TV on and I try to fall asleep while I'm watching TV. We hear a lot. Um, I'm browsing social media, watching YouTubes, and then wondering why I can't fall asleep. And you have to understand the light that we get from video screens, including our phones, actually suppress the melatonin cycle. So in essence, it's giving your brain the signal, oh, it's not time to go to sleep, it's time to wake up. Then, of course, there's, stress in people's lives, which we have to take a careful look at. Many times sleep is uh, inhibited by the stress a person has experienced. Most people have heard of the fight or flight response. Well, if you're under a lot of stress and you're in the fight or flight response, the number one chemical your body is secreting is adrenaline. And what is adrenaline? Well, that's what speeds us up. So if we have a lot of adrenaline pumping through the system due to the stress in our lives or other factors, then we have to look at that carefully. How can you reduce your stress? And if you can't, what can you do to counteract that? And there's many, many things that people can do at home from, meditation. Breathing exercises are also becoming very popular now because they work. And there's obviously many, many breathing exercises. There's books written about them. They're simple to do. They only take a few minutes, but they can be very effective. And then just learning simply how to breathe right. It's amazing how many people
Yeah.
don't know the correct way to breathe.
Before we go too much into how we can improve sleep, can you just explain a little bit more, like why is it important that we shift more into the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, and what is that anyways?
Okay,
So,
sure. Well, there's two portions. One is called the sympathetic, the other, as you just said, the parasympathetic. Very simply, the way we define those two portions is sympathetic is arousal, activation, adrenaline, fight or flight. Parasympathetic, we call the rest and digest. So when the parasympathetic has to be activated if we are to get a good sleep, because the parasympathetic tells the sympathetic to quiet down so that the physiologic processes that have to do with rest and digest can become dominant during the nighttime. And then
okay.
the body rejuvenates, then it repairs, and then we wake up with energy. It's like our battery can get recharged when the parasympathetic is more dominant.
And is the parasympathetic um, like more dominant in all the different sleep stages, or is it more active in deep compared to REM?
It fluctuates a bit, but in deep, it is the most dominant. Um, it's when the healing process occurs, but
Mhm.
it does fluctuate throughout the night.
Great. So would you say anything we can do before we want to fall asleep, which helps us relax and go more into the parasympathetic part? So make it more active, and more getting out of the sympathetic will help us fall asleep.
Yes, very simple things like laying on your back or sitting up, maybe meditating with the focus on breath awareness. Breath, or the breathing pattern, I should say, is the key to getting the parasympathetic more dominant. Uh, and specifically, focusing on sort of a sine wave of breath. So, nice inhalation, nice exhalation, no pausing. And if you're really stressed, um, there are there is a breathing ratio that we recommend. So let's say you inhale to the count of four, then exhale a little longer without getting uncomfortable and feeling like you're having air hunger. So inhaling to the count of four, exhaling to the count of six or more. But just doing that for 3 to 5 minutes before you want to fall asleep or as you're preparing for bed can be very effective because particularly the exhalation, is directly correlated with parasympathetic nervous system. There's other techniques that if you take a yoga class, you might learn, and one is called alternate nostril breathing, which also is very effective at, calming down the breath cycle. Very easy to do. You can look it up on the internet, shows you how to do it. But it's very interesting because some of the studies uh, show that your left nostril is correlated with parasympathetic, right nostril with sympathetic, and you can um, first of all balance them out. But then when you're really stressed out, you simply use the left nostril to breathe in and out of for a few minutes, and it will activate the parasympathetic.
Yeah. I think it's very important to be aware that we can activate us more with breath work, but also doing the opposite, which is
Yes.
important for sleep. So if we breathe in longer than we breathe out, it will activate us. And the other way around, like you mentioned, if we breathe out longer than we breathe in, then it will be more calming and more activating the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system, which we actually want. And the same is really working with the nostrils and using the left, for example, to calm ourselves, like you said.
And I think the other piece I forgot to mention is diaphragmatic breathing. We need to, if we're chest breathing, that in itself is stressful to the body. So we have some people put one hand on the belly, one on the chest, and make sure that lower hand, that's where you feel the motion. So and it's very important because there's a nerve that innervates the diaphragm muscle. The diaphragm is the muscle that sits underneath your lungs. So there's a nerve that's directly runs down both sides of the neck that's directly related to the vagal nerve, and it's the vagal nerve that determines we call it the vagal tone, and it is a parasympathetic.
Yeah, very important. Um, Often people like to have a very quick fix, so they're tempted to take something oral. So from medication about supplements and CBD, do you recommend any of those, or in which situation?
Well, if somebody's really struggling, and most of this is feedback I've gotten from our clients, some people find the CBD gummies or oil, whatever, helps with getting people into the sleep cycle. Melatonin has mixed reviews. And every time you look at the internet, you see a list of pros and cons. Some people swear by it, other people it doesn't do anything. In fact, some people makes them feel like they have a bit of a hangover and drowsiness the next day. There is an amino acid that I've seen some good results with, especially people who have poor REM sleep. Uh, and I'm not recommending this, but I'm just reporting. It's called Serene, Serine. And some people report that taking a capsule of that before they go to bed helps them with that. They see when they measure their sleep cycle, their REM sleep improves. There's many other, herbal supplements and so on. Some people try and use. I haven't really seen anything that is a one size fits all approach. I get mixed reviews about many of these recommendations. And if you do a search on any of the internet, you'll see all kinds of, mostly opinions, not a whole lot of really good scientific research.
Mm. Well, it makes also sense because people are different and we have a different background, a bit different history, and different reasons why we
Yeah.
cannot fall asleep, or some people wake up at night and can't go back to sleep, or just wake up early and so on. So there are different variations. Um, You mentioned CBD. What would someone have to look for if you want to go down that route?
A good formula that has a balance of CBD and CBN. They're different versions, different molecules that seem to calm and relax the nervous system.
Okay. Would you ever recommend classic medication?
If somebody is really struggling, you know, they can see their general practitioner or whoever their physician is and look at that. The problem is that is a temporary fix, and depending on the medication, some are better than others, some have, not very good side effects. So people have to be cautious if they start going down the medication route, and ideally they have a good physician who can guide them along that path. But, if somebody's really suffering, getting 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, it causes, it begins to create a vicious cycle. When sleep is interrupted like that or simply deficient, the body goes into fight or flight response because it needs that sleep, and the body knows that something is wrong. So it becomes a vicious cycle. Anxiety goes up, depression goes up, fears and worries. It can even make you somewhat psychotic if it lasts for too long. So in those situations, you know, a physician is recommended, and if not required, to come up with the appropriate intervention.
So that the body can catch up with the sleep, and then from there, basically work on the roots on
Yes, yes.
why someone is not sleeping well.
Yeah, sleep is such a big issue. There's so many factors. I mean, we're just discussing, we're just skimming the surface now. But it really can require a very comprehensive approach to fix the problem at the root.
What are more the symptoms people experience when they haven't gotten enough sleep?
Well, exhaustion, grogginess, headaches, and that, sort of also leads to another point, making, some people don't even know they have a type of sleep apnea. And there's
Mm.
many types, there's many grades of problem, but sleep apnea itself, if you're gasping for breath, that interrupts the sleep cycle, and that in itself can wake you up. So that is another um, disorder that has to be diagnosed by a physician and looked at, because sometimes, people with sleep apnea wake up in the morning sore throat, groggy, headachy. Why? Well, because they were experiencing moments of apnea where they're starving for oxygen. So that's another factor that has to be ruled out.
And so there are really clear physiological reasons why people don't get the sleep they need, and other are more psychological, so to
Yes,
say,
yes, yes,
stress related, overthinking. You mentioned in the beginning, that we have the memory formation during sleep and deep sleep. So when people get less sleep, do they also see that they don't remember things anymore? So is
yes,
that also a
absolutely. I should
symptom?
add that is one of the symptoms of poor sleep is short-term memory problems, even word finding, working memory, because the brain has to go from different, it's called short-term to long-term potentiation in order to elect neurochemically record memory.
It could, yeah,
And we've got to have good sleep for that to happen.
exactly. Um, what are other more complementary, you know, healthcare approaches people can engage with to improve their sleep?
In terms of complementary, there's many depending upon the individual. As a basic rule, some things like acupuncture, uh, massage, particularly massage that employs a somatic method. So literally getting stress out of the body. Um, Exercise also is extremely important. Not and important not to overdo it, especially don't exercise later in the day. That should be a part of this 10-3-2-1-0. Exercise shouldn't be anywhere within 5 to 6 hours of sleeping.
And
Why?
what kind? Is it more like strength exercise or more, going for a run?
Yeah, both. Both.
Both.
Yoga, though, is fine, and so is our other practices like Qigong and Tai Chi. They can actually be good before you start your, ritual before you start going to sleep because they tend to put us in tune with the body and get the nervous system to relax. So Tai
Exactly.
Chi, yoga, Qigong, those are all good methods to employ.
How about going for a walk?
Sure, going for a walk, but again, not too late, not, within a couple of hours. A
Mm,
walk after dinner is very good, even if it's just 10 minutes, because it complements the digestion cycle.
right. How about what you famous for neurofeedback?
Well, yeah, because the sleep cycle is driven by how the brain is working, how well it's working, or how well it's not working. So with neurofeedback, we can often identify what the brain might be doing that is blocking the sleep cycle. So many people, if they follow all the rules and they're still not sleeping, we use neurofeedback first to measure what's actually going on in the brain, and then to see if we can identify where the problem, and usually it shows up in a particular imbalance in the brainwave patterns.
And what would that typically be?
Well, there's different brainwaves categories, and the one called beta or high beta is when the mind is so overactive that many people say I just can't shut my brain off at night or when I try to meditate. So we can use neurofeedback to literally give that person feedback during a session when that activity begins to quiet and calm down. And oftentimes, in a fairly short period of time, the person will notice that, I'm calmer, I'm more focused, I'm more relaxed.
Right. Because this overthinking and worrying is kind of feeding what you said, the
Exactly.
beta rhythms and the more the activity, the sympatheticus, so to say. And so when you're training um, to be able to reduce this activity and reset the brain in that way, then it's easier to fall asleep and stay asleep.
Yes, yes. We call it endless loop thinking. Some people report that if they wake up at night, it's like a wheel just going round and round that they can't seem to interrupt. But there's ways to first lessen that and then finally get the brain free of that kind of activity.
Um, Another thing which becomes a method which becomes more and more popular, especially here in California, but also uh, at the East Coast, probably worldwide, is going for a sound bath or engaging in sound therapy or sound healing. Um, would that be helpful or supportive of?
Oh, definitely, because our body is like a big tuning fork. It vibrates. And with stress, with sleep problems, that whole level of energy gets thrown off. So sound, either sound baths or what you do is using tuning forks, can help to literally retune the nervous system so that stress is released. And I think that's very, very effective. Um, and there's, of course, different types of sound therapy, but, I think it's most important just to, trust your own instinct if and when you try it, because you should notice a reduction of stress and anxiety and a feeling of peacefulness sort of coming over you.
Right. And that's something people can do really shortly before they fall asleep. So that could be a precursor to, to going to bed or wanting to fall asleep. Um, but also it also works when people wake up at night and they listen to a shorter, maybe recorded session to help them fall back to sleep, as it's guiding the body into a deeper relaxation.
Yeah, I think it's very effective.
Yeah. Something else which is very helpful for people is progressive muscle relaxation. That's something I think originated in Europe, where people, you can do that lying in the bed, where someone guides you through your whole body and you activate the muscles and then you relax them consciously. And so you go through the whole body, and that also leaves your body very relaxed. That's very helpful and can be found easily online. And other things, so kind of methods, maybe yogis are interested in, is yoga nidra. Would that also be something helpful for sleep, or is it just a method which can be used during sleep?
Yoga Nidra, is a sort of it's similar to progressive relaxation. Lots of body awareness, that's called the 61 points exercise, going around the body to 61 points, using breathing. And the goal of Yoga Nidra is to access a state of consciousness that we call mind awake, body asleep. And the point behind that is because it's a technique where you can consciously go into that fourth state, that slow wave sleep state. So the objective of Yoga Nidra is not necessarily to go to sleep. In fact, it's to be more conscious. So Yoga Nidra can help produce super relaxation in the body, but the objective is a different state of consciousness.
Would Sometimes we hear that highly advanced yogis, they don't sleep that much, or they are aware during their during their sleep. But does that mean that they simply are in yoga nidra, or they're practicing that so that they are still aware while so they keep part of their consciousness aware while at the same time the body can rejuvenate and sleep?
Yeah, Yoga Nidra is evidenced by a sort of a witness or observing state. And there's relatively few people on the planet that can actually do it, but there are some yogis who have actually been measured with an EEG and proven that they are going into a state of consciousness. It's actually called the fourth state. Uh, in Sanskrit, it's called Turiya, and Turiya just means fourth. In some yogic traditions, it's called super consciousness, or that which is super or superior to the ordinary three states of consciousness. But, there are some advanced meditators who have learned to go into that state and who experience that and really don't need to go into the normal sleep cycle anymore.
So they would enter super consciousness like some people, do during the meditation, but they actually do it when the body goes to sleep.
Yes, when they want to rest. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And how is that different to what people call lucid dreaming?
Okay, so lucid dreaming is when, you become conscious during a dream. And sometimes you can just suggest that to yourself as you're drifting off to sleep, and the subconscious sort of listens to you and then says, "Oh, okay, by the way, when you're having this dream, you will become aware in the dream." And it can be a very therapeutic tool for some people, particularly if they have reoccurring nightmares or disturbing dreams. They can, suddenly become, "Oh, I'm dreaming," and gently maneuver the contents of the dream so that it isn't so stressful or distressful.
Right.
And it can be, there's books and methods and techniques written about lucid dreaming, but it's very different from yoga nidra and the superconscious state. Although you are, in a certain sense, becoming conscious during sleep, it's not the same thing because you're in a sleep cycle,
Yeah.
a dream cycle.
Mm. Yeah, I came first across that when I was studying ethnology. And at that time, I had an annoying, it was not a nightmare, but annoying dream, these dreams we have again and again. And so one thing, what you can do is you can alter what you do in your dream. And when you can do it, that can be enough to basically your consciousness letting go of that dream. And so that's what I tried, and I just turned around and looked, and that was it. It
Yeah.
basically resolved.
Yeah, it can be a powerful therapeutic tool and change many things in our lives just by changing how our subconscious is processing information, disturbing our sleep or giving us nightmares or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
And even if you know that we are dreaming during the dream, that can be helpful, I
Yes.
assume.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah. Um, Anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, just the importance of one more rule, and that's early morning sunlight. Very important to get sun exposure. You don't have to get a sunburn, but particularly early morning sunlight activates certain hormones in the body and actually helps lead the physiology of the body into a sleep cycle later, obviously many hours later. But I think sunlight is and fresh air is extremely important that we try to get some every day, at least 20 minutes and more if possible, without causing all kinds of skin problems and so on.
And would you say, is it enough to just go to work and catch um, a few
No, I think
minutes of sun?
it needs to be a little more intentional. And it doesn't have to be direct sunlight either, it can be reflected. But, just sit outside for 20 or 30 minutes if you can. Make sure the sun is hitting you, expose, make sure your skin is exposed, parts of you anyway, to the sun, unless you have any kind of problems with your skin. But sun exposure is extremely important for sleep.
Mm. And that's the early morning sun
Yeah, yeah.
exposure.
And particularly through the eyes as well. It doesn't, I'm not saying you stare at the sun, but you get reflected sunlight through your eyes, goes directly to your brain.
So that would be very important for people who work at home or from home, that they go outside, maybe make that a habit
Yes,
and
yes,
just have a
yes.
coffee outside or whatever they drink in the morning and make that a ritual.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Marty, again for your
Thank you.
wisdom.
Thank you.
And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, subscribe the channel if you like more. of these discussions or like the video, what we will also add is Marty has talked about sleep before in his Pillars of Health, and we will add the link to that video as well. If you have questions, reach out. We're always there for you. And yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day, beginning of your day, and most important, restful deep sleep.
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you.
All the best. Bye bye.